The echo of violins filled the grand hall, chandeliers blazing above rows of polished marble. People whispered as a tall man in a tailored black suit pushed open the gilded doors. Ethan Cole, self-made millionaire, once the groom-to-be of the bride, walked in with calm confidence. But he wasn't alone. On his arm stood his neighbor, Claire, a quiet woman the society crowd barely knew. Her emerald dress shimmered under the light, and suddenly every eye in the hall shifted toward her. Gasps rippled across the room. The bride, Vanessa, froze at the altar. She had left Ethan humiliated 2 years ago, calling off their engagement just weeks before the wedding. Now, seeing him here, at her new wedding, made her lips twitch with forced composure. Claire leaned closer and whispered, "Everyone's staring. Are you sure about this?" Ethan smirked, his voice low and steady. "That's the point. She thought she could erase me. Tonight, I'll remind her exactly who she threw away." The groom, a wealthy banker named Richard, stiffened, glancing nervously at Vanessa. She tried to laugh it off, but her fingers trembled on her bouquet. Guests began whispering more loudly. "Why is Ethan here? Who is the stunning woman with him?" As Ethan and Claire took their seats near the front, Vanessa's eyes narrowed like sharpened blades. Her pride couldn't stand the sight of another woman stealing the spotlight on her day. She leaned toward her maid of honor and hissed, "Find out who that woman is. I'll make sure she regrets showing up." Claire, unaware of the venom building across the aisle, sat gracefully, her posture calm yet unshaken. Ethan rested one hand over hers, not out of romance, but solidarity. The tension in the hall was thick, almost visible. When the priest cleared his throat and resumed the ceremony, Vanessa forced a bright smile, but her voice cracked when she said, "I do." Everyone noticed. The perfect fairy tale she had tried to build now trembled, threatened by the man she once betrayed, standing taller than ever, with someone who dared to outshine her in silence. The first battle of the evening had begun. The reception began almost immediately after the vows. Guests poured into the lavishly decorated ballroom, their chatter buzzing like restless bees. Crystal glasses clinked, laughter echoed, but beneath it all, eyes kept darting toward Ethan and Claire. Vanessa felt it. Every time a guest whispered behind a jeweled hand, she knew the topic wasn't her dazzling gown or the imported orchids. It was them. Her chest tightened as jealousy coiled like a snake. "Why is he here?" she muttered to Richard, forcing her lips into a smile while photographers surrounded them. "Why couldn't he just disappear like I wanted?" Richard shrugged uneasily. "He's nothing to us. Don't let him rattle you." But Ethan was rattling her. And the worst part? He wasn't even trying. He sat calmly at the table, sipping champagne, speaking quietly to Claire, who laughed at something he said. The sound was soft, genuine, so unlike Vanessa's brittle, practiced laugh that cracked under the weight of her insecurities. Vanessa couldn't take it anymore. She stormed toward them, her train dragging across the polished floor like a battle flag. Gasps followed her as she stopped at Ethan's table. Well, she said loudly enough for surrounding guests to hear. "If it isn't my ex-fiancé and his date." Claire looked up politely, offering a gentle smile. "Good evening. Congratulations on your wedding." The words were kind, but Vanessa's ears twisted them into mockery. "How sweet," she sneered. "And who might you be? Oh wait, don't tell me. Ethan found you next door, didn't he? His neighbor?" The room tensed. Claire blinked, startled by the cruel edge in Vanessa's tone. She nodded softly. "Yes, I live next door." "But—" Vanessa cut her off, voice rising. "Of course, a man like Ethan couldn't find anyone in real society, so he brought the girl next door as his trophy. How fitting." A few guests gasped. Others laughed nervously. Claire's face flushed, and for the first time that evening, she looked like she wanted to vanish into the floor. Ethan rose slowly, towering over Vanessa. His voice was calm, but the steel beneath it made the crowd go silent. "Careful, Vanessa. You're making a fool of yourself." "Oh, am I?" she snapped. "Or am I simply exposing the truth? You couldn't handle me, so you settled for this." She waved a hand dismissively toward Claire, as if she were nothing more than furniture. Claire's throat tightened. Humiliation burned her cheeks, but Ethan's steady grip on her shoulder kept her from breaking. He didn't defend himself, he defended her. "Funny," Ethan said, his voice low and deliberate. "You call this settling. Yet somehow, With her beside me, I've never felt richer. Meanwhile, on your own wedding day, you still can't take your eyes off me. The ballroom erupted in whispers, some gasps, some stifled laughter. Vanessa's face turned scarlet. She opened her mouth to fire back, but the words refused to come. For once, she was the one left speechless. Claire lifted her chin, her dignity returning in the shadow of Ethan's quiet strength. And in that moment, many of the guests began to wonder if they had misjudged the mysterious neighbor. Vanessa, however, was already plotting her next move. The humiliation had only just begun for all three of them. The music swelled, but the tension in the air was sharper than the violins. Vanessa had retreated for the moment. Her painted smile stretched thin as she clung to Richard's arm. Yet her eyes never left Ethan and Claire. She was wounded, and everyone knew it. Claire tried to breathe normally, but her chest still fluttered with nerves. The cruel laughter, the dismissive gesture, it replayed in her mind like a broken record. She leaned closer to Ethan and whispered, "Maybe we should leave. This is her night. I don't want to ruin it further." Ethan turned to her, his gaze steady. "Claire, listen to me. You didn't ruin anything. She's the one unraveling, not you. That's exactly what she fears most." His words soothed her, even as a wave of murmurs spread across the ballroom. Guests whispered in clusters, their eyes darting between the radiant bride and the mysterious neighbor. A society woman leaned to her husband, her voice dripping with disdain. "Do you see her dress? Emerald, far too bold for someone of her standing. She thinks she can outshine Vanessa?" Her husband replied, "Perhaps she already has." The comment sparked another ripple of hushed conversation. Claire felt the weight of 100 judgments pressing down, but she also noticed something else: admiration. Not all eyes were cruel. Some softened with curiosity, even respect. Then, Vanessa struck again. She clinked her champagne glass, the sound slicing through the chatter. The crowd hushed. With a saccharine smile, she lifted her voice so everyone could hear. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you all for joining us on this beautiful day." And her eyes flicked to Claire like daggers. "A special thanks to some unexpected guests. It takes real courage for a neighbor to step out of her comfort zone and mingle with our circle. Truly inspiring." Laughter rippled across the hall, forced, nervous, but loud enough to sting. Claire's face heated again, but before she could retreat, Ethan rose. He raised his glass too, his voice calm but commanding. "To Vanessa," he said, "for reminding us all that courage isn't found in designer gowns or glittering halls, but in walking into a room full of wolves and holding your head high. Tonight, the bravest person here isn't the bride. It's the woman sitting beside me." A gasp swept through the hall. Some clapped. Others whispered furiously. Vanessa's hand tightened around her glass until it nearly cracked. Richard shifted uncomfortably, his pride dissolving under the shadow of Ethan's words. Claire's throat tightened with emotion. She hadn't asked for this spotlight, but Ethan's unwavering defense lit something inside her. For the first time, she realized Vanessa wasn't just trying to humiliate her. She was terrified of her, and fear made people dangerous. From across the room, Vanessa's eyes glistened, not with tears, but with the venom of a woman who refused to lose. She leaned to her maid of honor and whispered a plan, her smile curling wickedly. If humiliation wasn't enough, then destruction would be. The ballroom glittered, but beneath the surface it was a battlefield. Vanessa's painted smile returned, though her eyes glowed with venom. She drifted gracefully between tables, greeting guests, laughing too loudly, her every gesture exaggerated. To anyone not paying attention, she looked like the perfect bride. But Ethan noticed the stiffness in her jaw, the twitch of her hands. He knew that look. Vanessa was planning something. Claire, still seated, tried to keep her composure. She smoothed the folds of her dress, refusing to let Vanessa's barbs break her completely. Ethan leaned closer. "She won't stop," he murmured. "She'll keep coming until she feels she's won. Are you ready for that?" Claire's lips trembled, but she nodded. "I didn't ask to be part of this, Ethan, but I won't run." A flicker of pride lit his eyes. That quiet strength, that was what Vanessa never had. Moments later, a waiter approached with a tray. "Compliments of the bride," he said, setting down 2 glasses of crimson wine in front of Ethan and Claire. Claire hesitated. Something about the gesture felt off. Ethan caught it too. He swirled his glass, watching the liquid catch the light. Vanessa stood across the room, watching them like a predator. He didn't drink. Instead, Vanessa clinked her own glass again, drawing everyone's attention. Before dinner is served, I thought it would be fun to play a little game, she announced sweetly. Since we have some surprise guests tonight. Guests turned curious. Vanessa's smile sharpened. Let's share stories. Embarrassing ones. After all, what's a wedding without a little laughter? Laughter rose, some genuine, others forced. Claire's stomach dropped. She could already feel the trap tightening. Vanessa gestured toward their table. Perhaps Ethan's lovely neighbor would like to start. Tell us, dear, what it's like living next to such a powerful man. Surely you have stories. The crowd's eyes burned into her. Claire's pulse hammered. It wasn't just a question. It was a stage, a guillotine dressed in velvet. She opened her mouth, but nothing came. Ethan stood first. I'll go, he said smoothly, voice steady. Relief washed over Claire. But his words weren't light-hearted. They were sharp, calculated. I remember once, Ethan began, his eyes locking with Vanessa's, how a woman promised me forever, then abandoned me at the altar because she thought money mattered more than loyalty. Funny thing is, she's standing right here, wearing a white dress she doesn't deserve. The air shattered. Gasps. Murmurs. A few even clapped nervously. Vanessa's smile faltered, her mask cracking for the briefest second. Richard stiffened beside her, his hand tightening around his glass until his knuckles whitened. Claire exhaled, her fear replaced with awe. Ethan hadn't just defended her. He had turned Vanessa's weapon back on her in front of everyone. But Vanessa wasn't done. Rage simmered in her chest as she forced a laugh. Oh, Ethan. Always so dramatic. But we all know the truth. You couldn't keep me. That's why you're here tonight, parading a nobody as your shield. Her words stung, but this time Claire didn't look down. She lifted her chin and, surprising even herself, spoke clearly. Better to be a nobody with dignity than a bride with nothing but envy. The room went silent. Dozens of eyes swung back to Vanessa, waiting for her reaction. Her lips quivered, and for the first time all evening, she looked cornered. But Vanessa's pride was too fierce to let it end here. And as her eyes flicked toward the dance floor, an even darker idea formed in her mind. The real humiliation was still to come. The orchestra struck up a lively tune, and the groom led Vanessa to the center of the dance floor. Her gown shimmered, her smile radiant, but her eyes kept darting past Richard, landing on Ethan and Claire. She wasn't dancing for her husband. She was performing for her enemy. Guests circled the floor, applauding politely. Vanessa spun, her movements flawless, each step rehearsed for months. Yet inside, her rage boiled hotter with every note of the violin. She wanted more than attention. She wanted to crush Claire beneath her heel. As the song ended, Vanessa clapped her hands delicately. Now, she announced, her voice dripping with sweetness. Let's invite our special guests to join us. Ethan, Claire, care to show us how neighbors dance? A ripple of anticipation swept the crowd. Some smirked, others whispered eagerly. Claire's heart pounded. Dancing wasn't part of the plan. She looked at Ethan, panic flashing in her eyes. He extended his hand. Trust me. She hesitated for a heartbeat, then placed her trembling fingers in his. The crowd parted, and suddenly, they stood in the middle of the floor, alone under the burning glow of chandeliers. The music began again, soft and haunting. Ethan pulled Claire closer, his movements steady and confident. At first, she stumbled, her nerves betraying her. But his voice reached her ear, calm and firm. Forget them. It's just you and me. And somehow it worked. Claire's steps grew lighter, her body moving in rhythm with his. The whispers faded, the eyes around them blurred. For a moment, it wasn't a performance, it was connection. Then the crowd reacted. Murmurs shifted into stunned silence. Claire's emerald dress swirled like living fire. Her eyes shone with courage, and Ethan's powerful presence made the two of them look like they belonged to a world far beyond this ballroom. Richard's jaw tightened. Vanessa's smile froze into a brittle mask. Every twirl, every graceful step was another wound in her pride. The people who were supposed to worship her on her wedding night now stared at Ethan and Claire instead. Vanessa couldn't stand it. She clutched Richard's arm, her nails digging into his skin. Do something, she hissed. What do you expect me to do? he muttered bitterly, watching his bride lose the crowd to another man. The music reached its crescendo. Ethan spun Claire one last time, catching her effortlessly as she nearly stumbled. Gasps turned into applause, genuine, thunderous applause. For a moment, Ethan and Claire weren't outsiders. They were the stars. Vanessa's lips trembled. She forced a laugh and clapped as well, but her eyes burned with fury. Inside, her pride screamed, "This is my wedding, not theirs. No one humiliates me," and walks away unscathed. She leaned to her maid of honor, her voice trembling with venom. "Find out everything about her. By the end of tonight, I'll strip her bare in front of all of them." Claire, catching her breath in Ethan's arms, whispered, "She won't stop, will she?" Ethan's gaze hardened. "No, and that means neither can we." The battle line was drawn, and Vanessa's next strike promised to be deadly. The applause from the dance still echoed when the guests returned to their seats for dinner. Silver trays clattered softly, waiters hurried between tables, and the air filled with the aroma of roasted duck and expensive wine. Yet the real feast wasn't on the plates. It was the gossip swirling in every corner. "Did you see the way he held her? She outshone the bride. Unbelievable." Vanessa looks ready to explode. Vanessa heard it all. Every whisper was another dagger twisting in her chest. Her maid of honor leaned in and slipped a folded piece of paper into her hand. Vanessa unfolded it beneath the tablecloth, her smile growing wicked. "I found something," the maid whispered. The neighbor, Claire. She works at a local library. Ordinary background. Lives alone. No family name, no fortune. Nothing impressive. Vanessa's lips curved. Perfect. Moments later, she stood again, glass raised. Her laughter rang out, brittle but commanding. "Before we enjoy dessert, I thought it would be fun to share more about our dear guests. After all, isn't it wonderful when we learn where people come from?" The room quieted. Ethan stiffened, already sensing the venom dripping from her tone. Claire's stomach twisted. Vanessa's smile widened. "Our charming visitor, Claire. Did you all know she spends her days surrounded by dusty books at a small-town library? No glamorous career, no powerful connections. Just paper and silence." A few guests chuckled cruelly. Others shifted uncomfortably. Claire's cheeks burned, her hands tightening on her napkin. Vanessa pressed on, her voice honeyed but sharp. "Of course, there's nothing wrong with being ordinary," Vanessa added mockingly. "But it's bold, don't you think? To walk into this world, dressed like royalty, when reality tells a different story." The laughter grew louder this time. Claire felt her throat close. For the first time since the evening began, she couldn't summon words. Every insecurity Vanessa threw out pierced deep. Ethan slammed his glass down, the sharp cracks silencing the room. He rose, his voice firm and low. "You want to talk about reality, Vanessa? Let's talk about yours." All eyes locked on him. "You parade yourself as high society, but every cent of this wedding, every jewel you're flaunting, it isn't yours. It's Richard's. Without him, you wouldn't be standing here at all." The crowd gasped. Richard's head snapped toward Vanessa, his face darkening. He hadn't expected Ethan to expose the truth so bluntly. Ethan turned, pulling Claire gently to her feet. "And as for her, yes, she works in a library. She builds her life with honesty and dignity. Something you could never buy, Vanessa, no matter how many diamonds you hang on your neck." Claire's chest rose and fell rapidly. Tears burned her eyes, not from shame this time, but from the weight of Ethan's defense. For the first time, the laughter around her faltered. Whispers shifted into sympathy, some even admiration. Vanessa's mask cracked, fury spilling into her trembling hands. Richard's jaw clenched as he muttered, "Is that true?" She looked away, unable to answer. The silence that followed was heavier than any insult. And in that silence, Claire realized something powerful. Vanessa wasn't humiliating her. Vanessa was exposing herself. But Vanessa wasn't finished yet. Her pride wouldn't let her lose, not tonight. And the gleam in her eyes promised that her next strike would cut deeper than ever before. The ballroom had gone tense, the music now only a faint background hum. Guests shifted in their seats, caught between fascination and discomfort. Vanessa's perfect smile wavered, but she quickly lifted her chin, clinging to the mask she had worn for years. "Really, Ethan?" she said, her tone dripping with mockery though her eyes trembled. "That's the best you can do? You think people care where money comes from? Look around you. They care about power. They care about me. But even as she spoke, heads turned away. Guests avoided her gaze, whispering behind their hands. Richard, still seated beside her, didn't smile. He stared at her coldly, his jaw clenched tight. "You lied to me," he muttered, not bothering to lower his voice. "You said you built yourself, that you didn't need anyone." Vanessa's heart pounded. She grabbed his hand desperately, her nails digging into his skin. "Richard, please, don't listen to him. He's only here to ruin us." But Richard pulled his hand away. The motion was small, but in a room full of watchful eyes, it felt like a thunderclap. Claire sat still, hardly believing what she was seeing. For the first time, the untouchable Vanessa looked cornered. Her voice rose, too loud, too frantic. "You think she's better than me?" she cried, pointing a trembling finger at Claire. "She's nobody. She doesn't belong here. She's just a—" Ethan cut her off, his voice like steel. "She's more than you'll ever be, Vanessa, because she doesn't measure her worth by how much she can humiliate others." The room broke into murmurs, louder now, no longer hiding judgment. Some guests openly shook their heads. A few even looked at Claire with pity and respect. Vanessa's chest heaved. Her grand wedding, her perfect night, was slipping away like sand through her fingers. She turned in desperation to Richard. "Say something. Defend me." But Richard only stared at her, his voice cold as stone. "You've embarrassed me enough." The words struck harder than any slap. Vanessa staggered, her lips parting in disbelief. For a heartbeat, her carefully crafted world shattered. Claire felt Ethan squeeze her hand under the table. His touch steadied her, but she could see the storm still raging in Vanessa's eyes. Humiliation wasn't enough to break her. Not yet. Vanessa drew a shaky breath and straightened, forcing the tremble from her hands. Her smile returned, brittle but defiant. "Fine," she hissed, her voice low enough for only Ethan and Claire to hear. "You want to play this game? Then I'll show you just how cruel I can be." And with that, she swept from the table, disappearing into the crowd. Ethan's jaw tightened. He knew her well enough to understand. This wasn't retreat. It was preparation. Vanessa was planning her most vicious strike yet. Claire whispered, fear creeping back into her voice. "What will she do?" Ethan's eyes followed Vanessa's retreating figure. "Anything. That's what makes her dangerous." The night grew heavier, the ballroom buzzing with nervous whispers. Waiters moved cautiously, as if afraid to disturb the fragile air. Claire sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap, forcing herself to stay composed. Ethan hadn't let go of her hand since Vanessa stormed away, but even his steady grip couldn't silence the dread crawling up her spine. Then, the chandeliers dimmed slightly. A spotlight flickered on, aimed at the center of the hall. Vanessa had returned. She stood tall, her gown glittering like shards of ice, her eyes burning with venom. In her hands, she held a microphone. The orchestra fell silent, the crowd turning as one. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice syrupy sweet. "I realize tonight has been unusual, but perhaps we all deserve a little entertainment. And what better way than with a story?" Ethan's shoulders stiffened. Claire's pulse quickened. Vanessa smiled, a predator about to strike. This neighbor of Ethan's, Claire, wasn't it? She's charmed us all with her courage tonight. But courage is easy when you have nothing to lose. Did you know she nearly lost her job at the library? That her bills go unpaid? That she's barely scraping by? And yet here she is, dressed like a queen, pretending she belongs. The crowd gasped, whispers breaking out instantly. Some turned to Claire with widened eyes. Others smirked, enjoying the spectacle. Claire's cheeks flushed hot, shame prickling her skin. She wanted to disappear. It was true. Her life wasn't glamorous. She had struggled, barely making rent some months. But to have it thrown out here, in front of strangers, like filth on display, it pierced her deeper than anything so far. Vanessa laughed lightly, savoring the moment. "Tell me, Ethan, do you enjoy rescuing strays? Is this your charity project? Because that's all she'll ever be, charity." Claire's vision blurred with tears. Her chest rose and fell unevenly. But before she could shatter completely, Ethan stood. He walked straight into the spotlight, his towering figure casting a long shadow across the polished floor. He took the microphone from Vanessa's trembling hands with a calmness that sent a hush over the room. "You think you've exposed her?" he said, his voice steady, ringing through the hall. All you've done is prove what everyone already suspected. You'll tear anyone down to build yourself up. Yes, Claire has struggled. She's faced hardship. But unlike you, Vanessa, she's never hidden behind money or lies. She works, she fights, and she stands here tonight with more dignity than you've ever had. The hall erupted, not with laughter this time, but applause. Real applause. Guests rose to their feet, clapping, some even cheering. Claire blinked through her tears, her shame transforming into something fierce, pride. Vanessa froze. Her plan had backfired. The humiliation she had prepared for Claire had returned to her tenfold. She looked around wildly, but all she saw were faces judging her, dismissing her, turning away. Richard rose slowly from his chair. His face was pale, his eyes hard. "We're done," he said coldly, his voice carrying across the silent hall. "This wedding, it's over." A collective gasp. Vanessa's bouquet slipped from her hand, scattering petals across the marble. For the first time, she was truly speechless. And as she stood alone in the spotlight, broken, Ethan took Claire's hand and led her out of the glare. For once, it wasn't Vanessa who owned the room. It was them. But Vanessa's eyes, burning with tears and fury, followed them. And the night wasn't finished yet. The ballroom was chaos. Gasps, whispers, the scrape of chairs. Guests rose, their eyes locked on Vanessa as Richard's words still echoed in the hall. "This wedding, it's over." Vanessa staggered, clutching at her gown as if the silk could keep her world from falling apart. "Richard, wait," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "You don't mean that. He's lying, he's twisting everything." But Richard didn't look back. He walked out of the spotlight, his steps heavy, his expression filled with disgust. The silence he left behind was louder than any insult. Vanessa spun desperately, her gaze landing on the crowd. "Don't just stand there. You know me. You know who I am." But the guests only exchanged looks, their faces cold, judgmental. A few whispered words floated to her ears. Fake, liar, desperate. Her mask crumbled. She turned toward Ethan and Claire, her eyes blazing with fury. "This is your fault," she spat. "You came here to ruin me, to destroy me." Ethan didn't flinch. He stepped forward, his voice calm but sharp enough to cut through her rage. "No, Vanessa, you destroyed yourself. All I did was show them the truth." Claire, still trembling, stood at his side. She felt exposed under Vanessa's burning gaze, but she didn't shrink back this time. "You tried to humiliate me," she said softly, her voice trembling but clear. "But all you did was show everyone the kind of person you really are." The words struck harder than Ethan's steel. They came not from power or money, but from honesty, and that was what left Vanessa with nothing to fight back. Her breath hitched. She looked around wildly, but no one moved to comfort her. No one defended her. For the first time in her life, Vanessa stood truly alone. The orchestra had stopped playing. The waiters had frozen in place. Even the chandeliers seemed colder, harsher. Vanessa's perfect world had collapsed in front of everyone. Her hands shook as she grabbed the microphone back, her voice breaking. "You'll regret this. Both of you. You think you've won, but you're nothing without me. Nothing." But her words rang hollow. The crowd wasn't listening anymore. Some had already turned away. Others simply stared with pity, as if watching the final act of a tragedy. Ethan took Claire's hand gently. "Come on," he whispered. And together, they walked through the crowd. This time, no one whispered against them. Heads turned, but the looks weren't mocking. They were respectful, even admiring. The neighbor, the outsider, had walked through fire and stood taller than the bride. Behind them, Vanessa sank to her knees, her gown pooling around her like the ruins of a fallen queen. Her tears smeared her perfect makeup, her voice breaking into sobs that no one rushed to silence. Claire looked back only once, her chest tight. She almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But Ethan's hand squeezed hers, reminding her of the truth. Vanessa had chosen this path. And now, the night belonged to them. The cool night air wrapped around them as Ethan and Claire stepped out of the glittering hall. The heavy doors closed behind, muting the chaos that still rumbled inside. For the first time all evening, Claire breathed freely, her chest rising with something that felt like relief. She looked up at Ethan, her emerald dress shimmering softly in the moonlight. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why did you bring me? You could have come alone. You knew she'd try to destroy me." Ethan stopped, his gaze steady on her. Because I knew she couldn't. Vanessa's power has always been fear. She breaks people by making them feel small. But you didn't break. You're stronger than you think, Claire. Her throat tightened, emotions crashing in waves. I felt like I was drowning in there. And yet, Ethan said with a faint smile, you walked out standing taller than she ever did. Silence lingered, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was calm. The distant sound of laughter and music faded into nothing, as if that world no longer mattered. Claire wrapped her arms around herself. I'm nobody, Ethan. Just a neighbor with nothing to offer. You defended me in front of them all, but why? He stepped closer, his voice low. Because you reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Dignity. Honesty. Things Vanessa could never give me. You didn't come tonight to impress anyone. You just came for me. That's worth more than all the diamonds in that room. Her heart stuttered. She hadn't expected this, hadn't even dared to imagine it. But standing there, the weight of humiliation and fear finally lifted, replaced by something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. From inside, the muffled sound of Vanessa's sobs and Richard's angry words drifted faintly. But Claire didn't look back. She didn't need to. That chapter wasn't hers. It was Vanessa's, and it was finished. Ethan offered his hand again, this time not as armor, not as a shield, but as something different. Come on, he said softly. Let's go home. Claire hesitated only for a second before slipping her hand into his. Their fingers intertwined naturally, as if they had been meant to fit all along. As they walked down the steps into the night, the glow of the ballroom behind them dimmed, replaced by the quiet peace of the city lights. No more whispers, no more cruel eyes. Just the promise of a new beginning. Two neighbors who had walked through fire and found something stronger on the other side. And though Claire still carried the scars of Vanessa's cruelty, she also carried something brighter. The knowledge that sometimes the greatest victories aren't about wealth, status, or revenge. Sometimes the greatest victory is simply walking out of the fire, hand in hand with someone who sees your worth, even when the world doesn't.